The clock on the wall hummed, a persistent, hollow sound in the dead of the night. It was 2 a.m. Mark sat before the monitor, the blue light washing over stacks of unopened mail and a cup of coffee that had long since gone quiet. He had followed every rule. He had earned the degree, secured the promotion, and checked every box on the list of expectations. He reached for the keyboard to type, but his hands began to tremble. He stopped. The cursor on the screen continued its rhythmic, silent blink, a steady pulse in the dark room. He stared at the flashing line, waiting for a spark, a thought, or a reason to commit the next hour to the screen. Nothing came. The silence in the office felt heavy, pressing against his chest. He pushed his chair back, the wheels scraping against the floorboards, and walked toward the window. Below, the city sprawled out in a grid of artificial light, endless and indifferent. He pressed his palms against the glass, feeling the chill of the pain, and looked out at the skyline. He had everything he was told to want, yet standing there in the quiet, he felt absolutely nothing at all. The morning sun cut through the office blinds, but the light brought no warmth. Mark walked through the rows of cubicles, the familiar hum of activity now sounding like white noise. He reached his boss's office and did not wait for an invitation. He stepped inside, the door swinging shut with a soft click. His boss was hunched over a stack of files, a pen moving rapidly across a ledger. Mark did not speak. He reached into his pocket, pulled out his security badge, and placed it onto the dark mahogany desk. The plastic clicked against the wood, a sharp, final sound. His boss did not look up. A hand drifted briefly toward the desk, fingers splayed, and gestured toward the door in a dismissive arc. That was it. 5 years of labor condensed into a single, silent gesture. Mark turned on his heel. He did not look back at the desk, the files, or the man behind them. He walked past the rows of monitors in the coffee station. He pushed the heavy glass door open and stepped into the lobby. The air outside smelled of exhaust and movement. He took a breath, his lungs expanding fully for the first time in months, and kept walking until the building was small in his rearview mirror. The city skyline pulled apart in his rearview mirror, dissolving into a hazy gray blur against the horizon. Mark pressed the accelerator, watching the familiar glass towers shrink until they were nothing more than jagged teeth on the edge of his vision. He drove for hours, the hum of the highway tires eventually giving way to the erratic rhythm of mountain roads. The air grew thinner, colder, stripping away the lingering scent of office paper and stale coffee. He pulled into a roadside station that smelled of diesel, dust, and damp earth. The neon sign flickered, a dying light in the shadow of the peaks. He pulled his phone from his pocket, stared at the glowing, static-filled map on the screen, and placed the device on the dashboard. He walked inside and found a rack of paper maps. His fingers brushed against the dry, textured surface of the paper. He pulled one free, the edges crinkling sharply under his grip as he unfolded it across the counter. The grid of the city was gone, replaced by a sprawling topography of elevation lines and winding, unpaved paths. He paid with cash, turned away from the counter, and stepped back out into the open air. The mountains loomed ahead, silent and vast. He tossed the map onto the passenger seat, shifted into gear, and drove deeper into the dark, jagged silhouettes of the range. The sedan became his home, its back seat a clutter of work boots and heavy blankets. In Nebraska, the sun beat down on the fields until his skin burned and his muscles screamed. He spent 14 hours a day stacking hay, the dry stalks scratching his forearms, the weight of the bales pulling at his shoulders. He didn't think about quarterly reports or career trajectories. He thought only about the next bale. In Oregon, the air turned salty and cold. He joined a crew cleaning fishing boats, scrubbing slime and dried scales from the decks with a stiff wire brush. His hands blistered, then calloused. For weeks, he reached for his phone at the end of the shift to check his emails, only to find the screen black and the battery dead. He started leaving it in the glove compartment. The habit of measuring his day by output, by hours billed or tasks completed began to crack. He no longer looked at the clock. When the sun went down, the work stopped. He ate simple food, slept in the back of the car, and woke up when the light hit his windshield. The restless need to prove his worth vanished, replaced by the simple, aching reality of his own physical presence in the world. The road eventually ended where the land met the gray, churning Atlantic. A small coastal town clung to the cliffside, smelling of brine, wet stone, and drying kelp. Mark pulled the car to a stop near the docks. He stepped out, his boots crunching on crushed shells. The wind whipped off the water, pulling at his hair, but he did not move to shield himself. He walked toward the harbor edge. There, sitting on a weathered wooden crate, was an elderly woman. Her name was Sarah. She was surrounded by a tangle of nylon mesh that looked like a bird's nest of knotted rope. She worked with a wooden needle, her hands moving in a blur of practiced, repetitive motion. Over and under, loop and pull. She did not look up as he approached. Her focus was absolute, centered entirely on the fraying strands between her fingers. Mark leaned against a rusted bollard, watching the rhythm of her hands. It was a hypnotic, steady pace, no wasted movement, no hesitation, no glance at a clock. The chaotic noise that had lived in his head for years, the deadlines, the projections. The blinking cursor seemed to quiet down in the face of her steady, deliberate work. He stood there for a long time, held by the simple, physical truth of the task. Mark cleared his throat, the sound sharp against the rhythmic slap of waves. "How do you plan for the season?" he asked. "How do you know if this net will last until the winter storms hit?" He was already calculating, his mind sketching out a timeline of repairs and potential failures. Sarah did not stop. She pulled the twine tight, the knot snapping into place with a sharp, final sound. She pointed a calloused finger to a fraying edge of mesh. "You fix what is right in front of you," she said. Mark stared at the tangle. His pulse quickened. The answer felt insufficient, a dangerous way to live. He needed a map, a schedule, a sense of where this work was leading in the coming months. He looked at the vast horizon, searching for a sign of what came next, but saw only empty water. The need to define his future clawed at him, a reflex he could not simply turn off. He reached out, his hand hovering over a loose thread, but he pulled back. The silence between them stretched. Heavy with his refusal to accept the simplicity of her instruction, she looked up then, her eyes steady, and waited for him to reach for the needle. Mark took the needle. It was heavier than he expected, the wood worn smooth by years of friction. He reached for the frayed segment, his fingers clumsy and stiff. He tried to force a complex weave, his eyes flicking toward the horizon, measuring the distance to the pier as if the calculation could save him. The twine snapped. He looked at the broken strand, the old urge to panic rising in his chest. Sarah did not speak. She simply tapped the net. He took a breath, forced his shoulders to drop, and looked only at the loop in his hand. He pulled the thread through. He tightened the loop. The knot held. He repeated the motion. Loop, pull, tighten. The world beyond the docks began to blur, receding into a gray haze. The need to account for the next 10 years, the next month, even the next hour, dissolved. There was only the tension of the rope and the placement of his thumb. He finished a row. He started another. His hands, once trembling with the weight of invisible expectations, found a steady, rhythmic pace. The horizon was still there, but it no longer mattered. He was not going anywhere. He was simply fixing the net, one knot at a time. The tide had retreated, leaving the sand ribbed and damp. Mark walked the shoreline, his pace slow, his mind clear of the usual debris of future planning. His boot struck something hard, half buried in the silt. He reached down and pulled out a heavy, brass-cased compass. The glass was cracked, but the needle still flickered, agitated and frantic as it hunted for a north that did not matter here. He held it in his palm, feeling the cold, dense weight of the metal. For a second, the old reflex spiked the need to know the path, to measure the distance, to define the destination. He watched the needle spin, a tiny, trapped thing in a casing. He looked at the vast, uncaring expanse of the surf. The pressure to be found, to be headed somewhere, to be someone with a trajectory, it was all just iron and glass. It was a cage he had forged himself. He did not check the direction. He did not pocket the tool. He closed his fingers around the casing, leaned back and threw it with everything he had. The brass arc cut through the air and vanished into the white foam of a breaking wave. He watched the water reclaim it, then turned his back on the sea, and walked toward the dunes. Empty-handed and finally still. Mark climbed the wooden steps to the porch. The boards were weathered, grayed by salt and sun. He sat on the edge, the wood groaning slightly under his weight. He pulled his phone from his pocket, the screen dull and dormant. He dialed the number he had memorized years ago. It rang 4 times before a voice answered, thick with a mix of confusion and relief. Mark did not speak for a moment. He listened to the static on the line, the sound of a world he had once obsessively tracked. The old instinct flared to account for his time, to explain the gap, to outline a roadmap for his return. He gripped the edge of the porch, feeling the grain of the wood under his thumb. He exhaled. "I am not coming back to the city yet," he said. His voice was steady, devoid of the jagged edges of his past urgency. He did not talk about his jobs, his savings, or his next move. He told them he was sitting on a porch. He described the way the water pulled back from the shore, the rhythmic slap of the tide against the pilings, and the smell of brine in the evening air. He was not looking for a destination. He was just listening to the sea. He hung up. The silence that followed no longer a void, but a space he finally occupied. The studio smelled of hemp and salt, a sharp deviation from the sterile air of his former life. Mark sat at a workbench, the wood scarred by years of use. He pulled a length of twine taut, his fingers moving with a rhythm learned on the coast. A student leaned in, watching the sequence of loops and tension. "How did you find your way back?" the student asked. Mark did not look up. He focused on the frayed end of the net, winding the thread through the loop with deliberate pressure. He finished the knot, pulled it tight, and set the tool aside. "I stopped looking for a destination," he said. The room went quiet. Mark picked up another strand, checking the tension, feeling the weave of the fiber against his skin. He did not talk about success, or stability, or the long road he had traveled to reach this desk. He simply pointed to the net in his hands. "I started fixing the small things right in front of me." He pulled the thread until the knot held firm, locking the mesh into place. He looked at the finished work, then reached for the next section. There were no more maps, no more horizons to chase. There was only the work, the steady pulse of the present, and the next knot to tie.